Today we're going to talk about the unique talent that women had when it came to contributing for the Mishkan and their eagerness to help. On the pasuk of Vayakhel Nashim Asher Nasan Liban Esan V'Chachma Tavu Izim, all the women that were carried with wisdom in their heart, they spun the wool of the goats. Rashi states that it means they spun the wool of the goats while the wool was still attached to the goats, and this was a umnas yisera. Hi haisa umnas yisera, that the women possessed this unique craftsmanship that they were able to spin the wool while it was still attached to the goats. So we need to understand, this is not the first time that the Yidden are contributing wool to the Mishkan. We find in a previous verse where it talks about the Chelek and the Argamon, the various types of dyed wools that the Yidden contributed towards the Mishkan, and it doesn't say over there that the women, they spun it while it was still attached to the sheep. So what is it about the goats over here that the women, they spun the wool while it was still attached to the goats? Furthermore, we find in a different parsha that in Vayakhel-Pekudei that when Moshe Rabbeinu commanded Bezalel to build for the Mishkan, he told him first you should build the vessels and then you should build the actual Mishkan. So Bezalel responded to Moshe Rabbeinu, the way of the world, the minhag ha'olam, is first you build the house, then you build the vessels. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, correct, this is what Hashem communicated to me. And B'tzel Kel Hayisi, you were in the shadow of Hashem, that you knew exactly what was communicated to me. And Bezalel went ahead and first built the house before building the actual vessels. So why, when it comes to us, regarding the tapestries, did the women contribute first to the roof, which is the covering of the Mishkan, before they actually built the krushim, which are the beams and the walls of the Mishkan, which is seemingly not in the way of the order of the world, where first you actually build the structure and then you build the covering. So the Bali Atesvis answer that the women contributing the urias, these tapestries first, was in order that once the actual structure would be built, there should be no delay. They should have the covering ready, and therefore they'll be able to have the Mishkan functional. But really, that doesn't take us all the way, because there was still going to be a delay. Once everything is built, it had to be brought to Moshe Rabbeinu, and then it could be constructed fully. So why is it that they brought the urias first, and more specifically, why did they find it important to spin the wool while it was still attached to the goats? So the explanation follows that when contributing to the Mishkan, there's various levels. On one level, when you contribute wool, and the wool is detached from the animal, that would belong to the inanimate world, to the world of daimim. It doesn't grow anymore, it's detached, it will get dry. On the other hand, when you contribute something as close as it is to still being attached to the animal, it would, first of all, the effort you put into it belongs to the world of the animal life, which is the world of Chai, and also it results in the wool being more fresh, more moist, and more better. So that explains why you would do it while it's still attached to the wool, while it's still attached to the goat. So what was it that the women found so important to spin it this way, and why did they do it first? So the answer is that Rashi says this was a umnas yisera, this was a special craftsmanship that they had, that they were able to spin the wool while it's still attached to the goat, and therefore they were using out their talents to contribute to the Mishkan, and therefore they did it while it was still attached to the goat, and then they brought it to Moshe Rabbeinu where it would be detached and be ready to be in place for being the covering of the Mishkan. And that explains why in the previous verses where we learned about the Chelek and the Argamon, which is the various types of wools, the blue wool, the purple wool, etc., that wasn't done while it was still attached to the sheep, because regardless, it would have to be detached before it would be able to be brought to Moshe Rabbeinu, because it would have to be dyed, and you're not able to dye it the various colors while it's still attached to the animal. So that differentiates between the two, why one was able to be brought right away, and while one would have to be detached, and therefore it couldn't be spun while it was still on the animal. And this all reflects the women's, their eagerness to contribute to the temple, to the Mishkan that was being built, and therefore they did it right away. Great. So what do we learn from this, and how does this reflect in halacha? So before we get to the lesson of what we learn from this, the Rebbe says that this actually answers a question that's brought down in Gemara, and that is, women seemingly are not able to participate in something that they're not commanded to. What are they not commanded to? So there's various mitzvahs that have a time limit. If it's a mitzvah saseh, shazman grama, and so on and so forth, there's various examples of women not being obligated to perform the mitzvah, and therefore they can't actually create the necessary steps to make the mitzvah happen. So the Rogatchover explains that the Gemara talks about two things. One, there's building the temple, and then there's one element of the temple that the temple has to be functioning in order to bring karbanos. And what that meant for the women was, although they could not participate in the building of a temple, which was a mitzvah saseh shazman grama mitzvah that had a time constraint, nevertheless, they were able to participate in the building of the temple, building of the Mishkan in the desert, by being involved in a way that would make that the temple, the Mishkan, was functioning so they can bring their karbanos that they're obligated to. And therefore, the Gemara says that it was a Chachmei Yisera. Rashi deviates from Chachmei Yisera and says Umnas Yisera, but it was a Chachmei Yisera. It was, they were participating in a way that it wasn't a malacha in itself, but it was a Chachma, it was their individual intellectual contribution that they were able to participate in, and therefore that's how they were able to be part of building the Mishkan. But Rashi takes it a step further. Rashi learns out from the pasuk where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu spread out the Urias ala Ayel. Rashi states that it actually means to the part of the part of the covering of the Mishkan that the women actually participated in. And what that was the Uriasism, the wool from the goats. So according to Rashi, it wasn't only participating in a way of them contributing because they had this extra wisdom and it wasn't a malacha, but Rashi actually learns out that it's integral to the part of the Mishkan to be functioning, this higher level of the roof, which the women actually contributed in, and therefore Rashi stresses that they actually participated in a way of a craftsmanship, and they completely participated in building the Mishkan. And the lesson that we learn out from this is twofold. One, every person has individual talents that Hashem gave us, and Hashem gave us those talents in order for us to contribute them to the world, making it a home for Hashem, and using it out to our best of our ability to further what Hashem wants in this world. So that's the first thing we learned from the women who had this unique talent of being able to spin the wool even while it's attached to the goats, and they fulfilled that talent. Same thing with us. We have to use out every one of our talents to further what Hashem wants in the world. And the second thing is, the women, they brought it to Moshe Rabbeinu once they finished spinning the wool, and right away it had to be cut. It had to be cut because it would be tzar balachayim. It would cause pain to the animal if the animal would have this spun wool still attached to it while it's growing. So right away they had to take it away, take it off, in order that it should be ready to make the part of the Mishkan that it was contributed for. So what does that mean for us? This second level, this second lesson of Tzar Balachayim. When we look around the world, there are many people who are lacking, specifically our fellow Yidden. When it comes to Torah and mitzvahs, they're not on par where they should be based on who they are. So it's our job too, just like when it came to contributing. First they gave the roof, and then they had the structure, not following the way of the world. So to us, the way of the world would say, first you have to take care of yourself, make sure that you're comfortable, make sure you have everything that you need, and then you can go and take care of that person on the level that he's at. Comes this parsha and this story of the women to teach us that we have to not follow the way of the world, but first you have to make sure that the people next to you are completely taken care of, making sure that they don't have any tzar balachayim, which means that they're not lacking anything from their soul, which is their true life force, and they are deeply connected with Torah and mitzvahs in every way they can be. And that will lead us to a time when there won't be any hunger and there won't be any thirst, but we will be all knowledgeable in the ways of Hashem. We'll all have that unique wisdom, and we'll all use it out in the best way with the coming of Mashiach speedily.